Coming up next, Old Father Christmas. On Beyond.
Christmas, a time for giving and receiving, a time of great goodwill and deep Christian significance. On the face of it, we understand it to be a celebration of the birth of Christ, but in truth, it is a marriage of pagan festivities, many of which predate Christianity by 2,000 years or more. Remember the image of that jolly old elf that emerged with early 20th century Coca-Cola advertising campaigns? Well, when we look more closely at the roots of that character, we find very dark beginnings which have little to do with being a benefactor of young children. Quite the opposite. In fact, they are beginnings that are so dark and bloodthirsty that children would absolutely reject any opportunity of sleeping in a dwelling for which he was scheduled to visit. In this episode, we examine these beginnings in which the Christian Church tried unsuccessfully to stamp out for over 100 years. Eventually, they had to absorb it into their calendar of holy observances in order to overcome some of the deepest and most extreme pagan beliefs. There is certainly a lot more of grave than gravy about the origins of this subject when we pull back the veils that cover the darker recesses of this area of the great beyond. In many ways, our various celebrations of Halloween, harvest festivals like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Eve are all a part of the same celebration. A celebration that dates back over 4,000 years to Mesopotamia and has been celebrated by most of the major civilizations around the world ever since. Although there are early ceremonies from more distant cultures, such as the Chinese practice of shooting flaming arrows into the air during New Year's celebrations, the greatest similarity in early history is that of the Mesopotamia ceremony of fertility in honor of the god Marduk. Marduk supposedly went to war every year when the sun started to disappear in order to save the sun and bring light back to the earth. Marduk is a very interesting character, for whom some believe to be the origin of the elfish or gnomish look of a beard and tall floppy hat. Very similar to the jolly old elf reported in Clement Clarke Moore's "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," which redefined our image of Santa Claus in the 19th century.
He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night."
Marduk needed help during his battle for the sun, and in order to ensure healthy crops for the upcoming year, Mesopotamians would make blood sacrifices on the fallow land to assist Marduk in his annual battle. The priests would announce it to the masses, and everyone would celebrate. Hence the beginning of the New Year celebration, and its integral link with the return of light following winter solstice. The ancient Greeks adopted these celebrations, and when the Greek and Mesopotamian empires fell to Roman dominance, the Romans did very much what they did with all cultures. They absorbed, melded, and normalized the celebrations. In this instance, they melded them into their own Festival of Light celebrations and called the whole festivity the Saturnalia. Marduk was replaced with father of the gods, Saturn. For the Romans, Saturn was the king of death, the past, memory, and nostalgia. Derived from the Greek god Kronos, time. He devoured his children from birth, a metaphor for human mortality and the notion that the clock begins ticking from the moment of birth and time inevitably devours its children. This also echoed the Marduk celebrations, which included the sacrifice of children and the sprinkling of their blood on the earth to bring back healthy crops in the new year. Later, when the Romans absorbed the Nordic tribes into the ceremonies, Odin was grafted together with Marduk, Cronus, and Saturn. That's where the white, unruly beard became integral to the image of the old father of the new year. The old father god who took the blood of the young children would within a few hundred years become Father Christmas. And a few hundred years further still, the familiar Saint Nick. But we are jumping ahead of ourselves. So Saturnalia was one of the longest celebrations of the year for the Romans. At its shortest, it lasted for about a month. But during its longest incarnation, the festivities lasted for 3 months. This pretty much covered the Harvest Festival, Halloween, Festival of Lights, the Festival of Rebirth, honoring of dead relatives, and New Year's Eve in one long party. So loved was this festival that it was actually against the law to argue during this season. To go one step further, there were parts of the celebration when the sun and darkness were in conflict, that slave and master would swap roles in the household. This ritual eventually melded with Norse myths and became a character known as the Lord of Misrule, which is still evident today in our Western culture and typified in Christmas pantomimes, where a leading male role is played by a woman and a leading female role is played by a man. Another integral part of the Saturnalia was the Juvenalia, which was the festival of children. This somewhat sweetened the whole celebration for children, especially during times when it was believed that children's blood was best for assisting in the battle for the sun. We are now brought back to the disturbing image of Father Christmas cutting young kids' throats. When the Roman Empire turned into the Holy Roman Empire, the emperor became the Holy Roman Emperor, i.e., the Pope. They simply couldn't have all of these pagans running around cutting children's throats on December 21st, so they outlawed the whole celebration. Needless to say, the cultures all over the Middle East and Europe that believed in child sacrifice developed deep cultural rituals to make it palatable to kill children. Such rituals as the practice of walking around town with a bowl of blood, drinking a lot of alcohol, singing songs of good health before every door, and making libations of blood to the land and trees. A bowl which was known as the wassail bowl. Wassail meaning well health. The Roman Catholics tried unsuccessfully to stamp out these rituals for over 100 years. They did not succeed until eventually they came up with the notion that if you can't beat them, join them. It was only after they decided to celebrate the birth of Christ on December 25th that the old practices became benign and Christian in practice. This led to the transformation from the sacrifice of children into gifts given to children, and the sack which was once used to carry the unfortunate remains of children turned into the bearer of gifts for the children. There are many other Christmas traditions that have less than Christian beginnings. We have seen how the Romans adapted festivities of different cultures related to the return of the harvest as they absorbed cultures into their empire. And later, after Christianity came to Rome, how Christmas was created to absorb those festivals and make them more benign within a Christian community. We have also seen the dark and sometimes sinister roots of old Father Christmas, Father Time, caroling, wassailing, and Christmas pantomimes. Other practices also had pagan roots, such as the mummers. It was believed that winter and darkness attracted evil spirits, so many rituals were devised that involved trying to purge the village of evil spirits. When we make loud noises at the entry into the new year with noisemakers, sirens, horns, and even pots and pans. Another belief from Saturnalia was the way we entered the new year would dictate the way the new year proceeds for us. If we are feasting and happy, such will be our fates in the new year. Another theme was rejuvenation, or the triumph of life over death. This was the reason for rituals such as trimming houses with green decorations for the season, a symbol of life in summer. The practice began by bringing evergreens into the house and decorating them with fruits or replicas of fruits such as apples and oranges to give the appearance of summer in the darkest part of the winter. These festivities had roots in many European cultures, the most famous of which is the Yuletide log ritual from Scandinavia. The meaning of the word Yule being festive. In some countries, it was believed that during the darkest part of winter, if you brought the fairies into your house for a warm breather, that your house would be blessed for that coming year. The items of greenery were considered to house many elementals or fairies, and the practice of putting out food and milk started here. However, if you kept the fairies or elementals in your house for too long, you could end up getting cursed. This melded with Christianity and became a reason why in some countries it is believed that to keep the decorations up longer than the 12 days of Christmas will bring bad luck. The 12 days of Christmas is in itself a compromise, a celebration of Christmas that covers the 12-day difference, which exists between the Roman Catholic Church's 25th of December and the Orthodox Church, who celebrate Christmas on January 6th. The Christians absorbed many pagan rituals by blessing them and incorporating them into Christian ceremonies. The berries and holly, for example, became a symbol of Christ's blood. In the 2nd century, the Church tried with little success to introduce Saint Nicholas, the patron saint of children, who was a kindly Turkish saint, as the replacement for Odin, and all the other pagan gods related to the December pagan rituals. Dickens did much to enhance the Christmas celebrations with his wondrous ghostly tale, A Christmas Carol, in which his knowledge of both the origins of Christmas and its dark side is made clear with the ghosts of Christmas Present, who is dressed as Old Father Christmas and carries a rusty sword.
"Come in!" exclaimed the ghost. "Come in and know me better, man." Scrooge entered timidly. "I am the ghost of Christmas Present," said the spirit. "Look upon me." Scrooge reverently did so. It was clothed in one simple green robe, a mantle bordered with white fur, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful air. Girded around its middle was an antique scabbard. No sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust.
And under his garments are two small wraiths named Want and Ignorance. Many of the cultures who adopted the benign St. Nicholas always included a dark side until he was transformed into the all-American Santa by Coca-Cola in the last century. Such is the power of advertising. What the church was unable to do in 1900 years was achieved by a soda pop in under 10 years.
the Holy Grail on Beyond. In this fourth season of Beyond, we will examine some of the major myths and legends of the paranormal. Many of which have woven themselves into the fabric of our culture. Many are interconnected with other subjects in this and other seasons of Beyond. Sometimes the research leads to answers. Sometimes answers from science, sometimes from spiritual realms, sometimes from somewhere in between. Mysteries that inspire the imagination and compel us to seek an answer. On Beyond.
As we can see, the Christmas celebration is really a melding of about a dozen ancient cultures and a well-thought-out marketing campaign. So now it is plain to see that when we hang out our stockings with care, or deck the halls, or sing a carol to celebrate the season, there are a number of pan-cultural sources that have contributed to the customs, some of which were not quite so warm or comforting. Does this detract from the season? Probably not. If anything, it adds to the magic of the season, to know that it exceeds beyond the limits of one's culture or one's religion, and to understand that these are among the most deep-seated and important rituals that our cultures have to evolve, to deal with the darkest and coldest part of the year. Rituals that satisfy a deep human need to give, to remember and celebrate the past, to be kind to fellow travelers, to give thanks, to hail the return of light, to affirm goodness, to dispel the darkness, and to shine a light into the future, and hopefully influence for the better what lies beyond.